Hey folks, so here we are with the second episode of AI Agent Podcast, and we have Tom Shapland with us, who is the founder of Canonical Chat, where they are helping make the life of conversational AI developers much easier. Hey Tom, thanks for kind of coming on the podcast. Great to have you here. Would love to know more about you, more about Canonical. What are you doing at Canonical? Hey folks,
Great to be here, Karan. Thank you for inviting me. Here at Canonical, we're building a way for voice AI developers to see what's happening in their calls and how to improve their voice AI agents. We start by giving the voice AI developers a map of all their calls. We show them the different calls, the different stages that their calls are going through, and they can get just this global, bigger picture of okay, this agent is performing in this way, and 80% of my calls are going down this happy path over here, but 10% are having this problem over here, and I can see that they're having this problem now, and I can then drill into those calls and figure out how to improve my agent. So that's the overview of what we're building.
Hey folks, got it. And then, for the audience, what is your current role at Canonical? Hey folks.
I'm the CEO and co-founder.
Got it. Yeah. But I mean, you are involved in the technical side of things as well, or mostly the product side of things?
Yeah. So I'll give a little bit of my background, my story, and what led to us building this product. I'm technical, but in a funny way. I'm a former academic, so I write spaghetti code. Now that I have Claude, I write a little bit better code than I used to write. So I'm a little bit. My co-founder is really the one that builds the production stuff. I sort of build prototypes and stitch things together, different little pieces of the app. So the background on my company, I'm going to start with just the background on me. I came into tech about 10 years ago. I invented something during my PhD work that helped farmers know how much water their plants were using. And I built that company for 10 years. About midway through building that company, the TensorFlow API came out with, and we started building neural network models to improve our irrigation technology product. That was my first exposure to non-deterministic models and just how powerful these neural network models were, but also some of the shortcomings of them. And we built some really cool stuff. We had this proprietary data set from this sensor that we would put in the field. And we built some really cool models on top of that, such as a computer vision model that you could point a phone at a plant and see how thirsty it was and that sort of thing. And that company was acquired about 2 years ago. And the CTO of that company and I are good friends. His name is Adrian Cowham. And we wanted to start again and start a new company. And that's why we started Canonical AI. We wanted to go on the journey again. And we first started looking around the LLM space because like many founders, it's just really interesting and fun area to be working in right now. There's it's just cool technology, lots of interesting things happening with it. And we initially started building a semantic cache. So the semantic cache was a way for basically, you can think of it as a layer between the user's query and the LLM. The user query would come in, and you would first search the cache for what is semantically essentially the same query. And if you found it in the cache, you could return it from the cache rather than calling the LLM. It's faster and cheaper. And we started working with voice AI developers because they cared about latency. And that just sort of turned us on to the voice AI space. The voice AI space is really fun. It's growing fast. There's lots of new applications for it, lots of legacy applications for it. It's a nice community. And so it's just a fun place to be in. And working with and talking to a lot of the people building voice AI agents, they kept telling us, what you're building is cool with the semantic cache, but I don't need that yet. I just need to make my agent work 100% of the time. And now it only works 90% of the time. And I don't really know why. I don't have any visibility into what's happening. I can only listen to a subsample of calls or I hear about the issue from a customer who's complaining. And that's what led us to do this pivot where we're now building something that we call it mixed panel for voice AI agents. It gives people visibility into what's happening in their voice AI agents and the ability to drill into individual calls and see audio metrics around latency and stuff like that, as well as just see what happened in the call and how they can improve it.
Got it. And like very curious, what kind of metrics are you showing? Like, is it like around kind of accuracy of the answers or like a kind of engagement, etc.? Or
there's the types of metrics that we show our customers fit into two camps. One are like technical audio metrics. Excuse me. I would call them technical metrics. And the other camp is conversational metrics. So the technical metrics are things like what's the latency? How long does it take the AI to respond after the human talks? Or how many interruptions are there? How many times did the human interrupt the AI? Because that can be an indication that the AI is going off the rails. It's not answering the question correctly. And the human keeps saying like, no, you're getting it wrong. I want this. And then there's conversational metrics. Those are the things that you were just talking about. Like, I want to know, what is this call? Did this call successfully schedule a meeting with the salesperson? Because that was the purpose of the voice AI agent, was to qualify prospects, and did it successfully schedule a call with the voice AI agent? And other questions you might want to ask about the conversation kind of across your data set. Those are more conversational type metrics.
Makes total sense. And yeah, while you were kind of describing your journey, I realized like AI generally has come like far long way, like from kind of starting from the times of ImageNet, like neural networks and CNNs, RNNs, and STNs, what transformers, obviously being the big one, big enabler of the current wave. What was your aha moment around LLMs particularly, like kind of when like before like starting Canonical, where you were like, this is kind of a big change in the world of AI and in general?
That's funny. I wonder if people are going to look back and say like, what was the first time you interacted with an LLM where you're like, whoa, this thing is neat. Totally different than my other interactions with the computer. I mean, for me, it's just as a consumer using ChatGPT, and like I'd always wanted to go to Japan, and we had a trip coming up to a plan to go to Japan. And I just asked it for an itinerary. I was like, how did it know like that to do that? And then pretty soon I was not using Google anymore and mostly using LLMs for anything I was searching for. And I mean, it's all stuff that's going to resonate with your listeners. We're all probably power users of LLMs, writing code with them and writing applications with them and interacting with them regularly.
Makes total sense. Yeah. I think. My next question is around like conversational AI. How do you think like it has shaped over like recent months? Obviously, GPT-4 launch where kind of like before that, like generally like people's kind of idea was it's good for chat, but still not there in terms of latency and kind of like humanness in some sense, being equivalent to some like you're talking to a human. And so kind of like people were still skeptical about like usage of the same in like conversational mode, etc. But like after GPT-4 launch and some of the other things around it, I think it seems like much more doable, and it's a technical challenge to accomplish it. But
I think, I mean, it's changing quickly, like everything in the world of LLMs. And we can think of conversational voice AI as fitting into three camps. There's legacy. There's the one camp is like replacing legacy business processes with voice AI. So you might, instead of calling a dentist and talking to a person to schedule an appointment, you're instead talking to an AI agent. Another camp is like these emergence of new types of, how would I call that? there's the emergence of new applications that are only enabled by the fact that voice AI exists now. So it's not legacy use cases for voice AI, or legacy business processes that voice AI can help, but totally new things that are enabled by voice AI. And one of these that comes to mind are what my friends at Bordy are building, where they're building a AI that learns about like your professional aspirations and the types of things you're trying to do, and helps introduce you to people that you might um, uh, benefit from talking to, helps you network. That's a really cool use of voice AI. And then another camp is another one that might fit into that, that's kind of a big example, is like character AI. We're seeing lots and lots of people interact with characters in text-based form now, but we're starting to see that more with voice. Character.ai has introduced voice, and you're just seeing more of that on like the character type AI applications. And then finally, I think we're going to see more voice user interfaces, voice first user interfaces. And I think that's going to be, in a sense, a conversation you're having with an app. Even though maybe you're not talking to an agent, you're still you might be talking to, I don't know, Google Maps or something, where it's a voice first interaction. So I think we're going to see all those things. We're seeing all those things emerge. It's really fun, really cool to see the changes.
Got it. And kind of continuing on that, what are some of the biggest challenges that you are seeing right now? Like when somebody is building a conversational AI agent?
I think a lot of the challenges now are the fact that let me step back and kind of talk about the history of voice AI a little bit. In the past, what voice AI, like the Alexas, the home system type voice AI that we're familiar with, they were called intent-based or rule-based systems. And they had no sense of context. And they weren't very good at really understanding, even though they're called intent-based systems, the intention of what the user is saying. So you can never really get very far with them. And what's so powerful about the LLMs, and why what I'm seeing from talking to a lot of people that have built intent-based systems and they're now migrating to LLM-based systems, is that they understand the context, and they also can better understand the intent of what the person is asking. So they're more likely to respond correctly. And so that's like the promise of, and that's the reason why I think we're going to see voice AI eat the world, is suddenly LLMs make them much better at really understanding what the user needs. The challenge is still in trying to make them work 100% of the time. 90% of the time, you have this magical experience where you're like, how did it know that's what I wanted? I said that in a weird way, and I stuttered halfway through it, and it still knew what I wanted. But then 10% of the time, it goes off the rails in a weird way. Maybe it was something that happened with the transcription. And so the LLM didn't understand what the person needed because the input data to the LLM was wrong. And that's currently the big problem that voice AI developers are facing now, is like, how do I get from 90% of the time working to 100%? Because the large enterprise customers want it to work 99% of the time. Or 100% of the time. They're not tolerating, they won't sign a contract if it's only working 90% of the time.
That totally makes sense. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and that's where we come in too, is we're giving voice AI developers visibility into what's happening in their calls, so that they can see like the bigger picture, like, oh, my agent is working 90% of the time, and my calls are going down this flow, but there's this weird thing happening like midway through some of the calls. And now I know about it, and then I can look at those and figure out how to fix it, how to update my system prompt, or I'll see that one of my tool calls that I'm using, I'm like going about it in the wrong way, and I need to optimize that.
That totally makes sense. And you mentioned about tool calls. So are you seeing kind of like in general industry, how are you seeing like the agents that can take actions for farming? Are they getting into production ready use cases? What's your take on that?
Yeah. So if we go back to my earlier categorizations of what type of conversational voice AIs we're seeing one type that's like character based. So they're like this emergence of a whole new category of product, and that's enabled by voice AI. And some of these like character type things, they don't really need tool calls. Some may, but some of them don't. So you see there's this whole category that doesn't need tool call, but they're kind of the exception. Like the ability to take an action with another computer system is table stakes for a lot of what the conversational voice AI agents are trying to do. So examples of that are, like kind of the canonical example is people trying to schedule an appointment. So there's a lot of people really interested in using voice AI agents to take incoming calls and figure out to qualify the customer and then book a meeting with them, or take incoming calls from existing customers and book an appointment with them. And in order to do that, you have to have some sort of ability built into your app for the LLM to see what times are available. And then once those times, you figure out what times are available, what works for the caller, to then book that time. And that requires some sort of way to communicate with another computer system, right? And take action.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think kind of it's a mix of use cases, as you just mentioned. Some kind of requiring these action calls, and but most of the kind of industry related use cases probably do require some level of action,
yes,
or kind of raising a ticket, etc. But yeah, I mean, that's good to know. I think one of the things that kind of you mentioned, like I think Canonical helps kind of improve reliability of the AI agents by providing, the voice agents, by providing the kind of places where it's going wrong, like in some sense, kind of insights, analysis around it. So like for kind of people listening, you have some kind of case studies or like of kind of people using Canonical and improving their voice agents.
Yes, I think the place I'd like to generally start is right now people are kind of trying to poke around a room in the dark, and they don't have the capacity to listen to all of the calls. It's too much to listen to. And when we first show people, like, here is a map of what's happening in all your calls and the paths that most of your calls going down, it's like an epiphany. They say like, oh, that's how my agent is performing. I thought it was something like that, but I didn't realize that suddenly, instead of just like flashing a light bulb, using a flashlight to illuminate little corners of the room, someone turned on a whole light and I could see the whole room. And then in terms of like specific use cases where people have looked at what we're doing and they're like, oh, suddenly I see that that's a problem that I need to fix. I think the ones that come to mind are things like, it's just minor changes to the system prompt that all that really needs to be done. So like somebody didn't realize that calls were terminating at this weird point because the system prompt told the agent, the system prompt wasn't clear enough about what to do after this step. And sometimes it led to the agent thinking the call was done and the call ending and that not being the outcome that they wanted. So it's really not, a lot of it isn't, it's about refining and crafting these prompts that people are writing. It's kind of the first step for a lot of people. And it's hard to do that if you're not really seeing the outcome of all your calls.
That makes sense. And that's where kind of, I'm guessing, you had two types of metric, technical metric and conversational metrics. And conversational metric will be coming in picture there.
Yes, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Got it. I think, yeah, we are coming almost to the kind of last section of the podcast, but kind of, I'm really excited to know, like, if you're excited about some of the emerging technologies or trends generally around the space. Probably kind of, in some sense, latent, not that visible.
Yeah, I think voice AI in general is latent and not that visible. People, as consumers, most people think like, oh, I don't want to interact with a computer. It's going to be an IVR, this sort of system where it's like to talk to a salesperson, press 1. To talk to customer support, press 2. And people hate those. And people have also been interacting with Siri and Alexa for years, and those also are frustrating experiences where they often don't really get you. And this voice AI, backed by LLMs, is it's a miracle. Like you can get these sorts of things done that you could never imagine were possible with your voice before. And once people start interacting, like the average consumer starts interacting, having 1 or 2 interactions with the voice AI system, they're going to realize like, oh, the world has changed. Now that we can put LLMs behind and voices onto LLMs, we're going to be able to do a lot more. And it's like we're finally fulfilling the promise of putting voices on computers by putting LLMs behind them.
Makes total sense. And kind of any advice of people who are building in the AI space, like budding entrepreneurs, I think like there are kind of, because of the space being so kind of hot and like actually valuable, like a lot of people are just coming in. So any advice?
My advice for entrepreneurs is the same as it's always been for my last company and this one. So my last company was in YC. I'd meet a lot of entrepreneurs through that. And this company too, I'm actually having to really live that advice. Is like, go get users. When you get users,
any advice?
Everything else falls in place. And it can be hard to get users, especially if your business model is something where it's not just like something people can sign up for free and play around with. Like if you actually have to sell people on it, it can be hard to get people to talk to you and to sign a contract. But once you start getting users and traction, everything else falls into place. That's when you start learning more about what is the right thing to build. That's when you can start recruiting employees or a co-founder or investors. So that's the thing to do. And a lot of people that start companies, they have technical backgrounds and they kind of have an aversion to doing sales. And for that, I tell people that like, just remember that if you can get them to talk to you, you're gonna be the most interesting person they talk to that day. Most people's jobs pretty routine, kind of boring, and then when they get to talk to a founder building something new, it's a really neat experience. So get out there and try to get people to talk to you.
That's a great advice for the entrepreneurs, including me. Yeah. And what's next for Canonical? Like any kind of new features that people can be who are using us can be excited about, or people who are like in the audience might be wanting to use it, or that you would want to share?
I mean, we're at a really fun stage now where we're iterating quickly on the product and getting a lot of feedback. Everything's still so new in the voice AI space. I think the next thing is just keep building the product and keep getting more users and talking to more people. If people want to get in touch with us, please check out voice.canonical.chat or look me up on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect.
Yeah, I think that kind of answers my next question, but I'll still bring it up. What's the best place to reach out? Like, is it Twitter, LinkedIn, any other?
I spend more time on LinkedIn than Twitter. So LinkedIn is definitely a better place to reach me. Please check out our website too at voice.canonical.chat.
Yeah, I think that will be in the kind of both the Twitter and YouTube share that we'll do, which will be posted on LinkedIn as well. So we'll have Tom's account link there, so you all can kind of DM him for any questions. And now coming to the last question, which I think is kind of like a philosophical one, which I generally ask people like building and specifically living in AI spaces. How do you envision this technology changing human lives over like next 5 years, for that matter, including voice AI or AI agents, etc.?
I go back to the William Gibbs quote that the future is here, it's just unevenly distributed. I think as the people building the technology, we're already living with it. And then you'll go to, meet up with a bunch of your old friends from high school or something. And they're like, what do you mean you don't use Google anymore? I'm like, why would I use that? It hallucinates. And they're like, no, it doesn't hallucinate. LLMs hallucinate. I'm like, no, Google hallucinates. It's all garbage coming out of Google. So I think one thing we'll see in the near future is everyone's going to be using LLMs like the way that us technology developers are using LLMs. And then from there, I don't know. I think it's harder to predict. There's lots of interesting things that people say about having more interactions with robots than maybe sooner than we expect. But I don't know. I'm not good at looking way into the future. I'm better at. I'm a little nearsighted. It's one of my failings as a tech developer. I'm a little too nearsighted sometimes.
Got it. No, I think that was a great conversation. Thanks, Tom, for taking the time out. And let's stay in touch, and kind of the audience will reach out to you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, wonderful to be here. Thank you again for the invite.